Hello, this is Samantha Clark, and this is my screencast on the implications of Kelly Gallagher's deeper reading. So we'll go in chapter order. For chapter 1, it's called Why Reading is Like Baseball. And what it means by this is you can understand baseball and enjoy the game at a surface level. Gallagher tells the story of his children that we read last semester. But there's a deeper, more beautiful art to it, like there is with reading books or any kind of text in our classroom. So a big argument here is without deeper reading and acquired skills, our students won't fully understand a text. So there are multiple levels of reading. There's just a surface understanding, then there's understanding meaning, and then there's using the text and understanding the context to apply it to other situations and use it in an artistic form. So students need to be taught to read between the lines and to understand subtext. We can't assume that our students know how to do this just because it's become so natural to us. For instance, in The Life of Pi that we're reading right now in my fieldwork, there is an excerpt in which Pi says he's walking around in Canada and he sees the Virgin Mary in a clearing. And Pi says, he didn't mean he literally saw her, but he did see her. So we took some time in class for the students to discuss what he meant by that. Did he actually see her? Did he not see her? What other meaning is there to see? And the students came to the conclusion that see could have another meaning. For instance, if someone said, "Oh, I see," it means they understand. So they came to the conclusion that for the first time, Pi was fully understanding the story of the Virgin Mary or this aspect of Christianity. So students need to be taught the skills associated with academic writing as well as a point that Gallagher makes here. And that's specifically because they cannot write academically until they can read academically, because writing is an interaction with a text. So once students have gone through the process of analyzing a text, they can interact with it through writing. Chapter 2 is Teaching Challenging Text. So we have certain steps here. Like I said, there's this final step of writing, so metaphorical and reflective responses to the text. So our first job as an educator is to frame the text for our students. This is the access to background knowledge, prefacing with activities, to understand the topic, the context, the time, and then reading the text carefully. This is kind of getting a gist. You want to make sure they understand the actual plot before they try to analyze any aspects about it. Then to return to the text, to begin to analyze it, to appreciate the nuances of it, to find the metaphors, the symbolism, and so on. Then collaborate with others. Gallagher has a big argument here that you cannot understand a text unless you're collaborating and discussing it. And then here's that metaphorical and reflective response to the text. An argument here is that students need to learn to not simply understand the plot of a story, but to analyze its construction. So this is that deeper reading, that going back to the text that we need to do with our students. So students' reading should be prefaced and guided so that they can learn how to do this, and this is our responsibility as educators. Chapter 3 is Focusing the Reader. In this chapter, Gallagher is arguing that we can't just have students cold read a text. They can't just jump in to seek to understand it the very first time. So avoid cold reading. Students need a purpose and a focus. Framing activities aid in student understanding. So here's some activities that we can use. This has been really helpful with forming lesson plans for reading. So web searches, researching before reading, anticipation guides. So this is getting a feel for what students think about a topic before jumping in. KWLR charts, so that's what they know, what they want to know, what they've learned, and then they can research afterwards. Focus questions, so asking a question before students start reading so they can search for an answer. The word game and other writing activities. So this is a cool one where the students come in and they see a word on the board and they have to recall what that word's importance is from the reading and write about it. Interrupted summaries. This is specifically something I do when reading in the classroom. Let's say we're reading a really intense chapter that the students don't quite understand. For instance, the first book in Life of Pi is really dense about his childhood, about religion, about history. So just right at the end of the chapter, as we're reading aloud, I ask the students to clarify what happened for me. I don't specifically do it, but students raise their hands, or if no one's volunteering, they take a moment to discuss the chapter and come back and volunteer to explain it for the class. One question, one comment. So when you send students home to read, they're to come back with one question about the text and one comment on the text, and a word scramble prediction. So before reading a text, you have this random list of words and students are to predict what's going to happen. My guide teacher does a really interesting thing where all of the students pick a research topic about the context of the book. For right now, they're doing Life of Pi, like I said, and in book one, it's a lot of dense topics about India, the unrest at the time after the British Raj, and what's happening with religion, and zoological facts. So the students, as they read, their purpose is to search through the text for those clues about their specific topics, and then they have the opportunity to share what they're learning on their own, which I think is really interesting. And then I do the recap as we're reading, so that is the interrupted summary, just for the students to get a clarification of what's happening in the text. Chapter 4 is effective first draft reading. So students need to be reassured that it's normal to feel confused during complex readings. Good readers tolerate feeling lost. I'm sure we've all had that before where we're reading something that's really dense, really academically motivated, so there's a lot of complex diction and really high academic language that's specific to a field, and we just lose it. We have no idea what they're saying. Students have this too, and we need to respect that and know that they're going through that, but also let them know that it's perfectly normal. Because there have been a lot of times when I've read and then I stop because I don't know what's going on. And that's not a good reading habit. We need to learn to move past that, to seek understanding, and to identify where we need clarification, but move on. So teachers need to provide students with adequate reading preparation. So let them know you're going to feel confused, just keep going. It's okay. Identify where you need to come back to. Ask questions about certain areas of the text that are confusing. And ways that we can aid them with their readings of complex texts are fill in the blank plot points. In the book, they use Romeo and Juliet, which is Shakespearean language, which is really difficult for students to understand. So we have 4 out of the 5 plot points listed in Act 1, Scene 2. And we have one missing. And we're asking the students what happened here. We can turn headings into questions. This happens more with nonfiction texts or maybe chapter headings. And we can ask, what does this mean? So this is talking about the solar system. What about the solar system? So as we go through it, they seek to understand. 20 questions, just have them come back with 20 questions of the reading that they got confused about. So they're not just prepared for that confusion, they're looking for it. They're seeking to understand where it happens. Focus groups for analysis, so really dense text, having students break up and analyze a different part of the text or something different that's happening in the text. And character charts, so this is how characters change throughout a text, things that they're searching for about a character. I feel like this could be especially helpful for books that may not have Western culture names in them, like Things Fall Apart. They get confused about who's related to who and which time a certain person lived in, so that could be really helpful. Deepening comprehension through second draft reading. This is chapter 5. So the big idea here is that inference needs to be taught. So when we're looking through a text and we're not just trying to understand what it's saying, but we're understanding what it means, what the purpose of the writing is, what all the nuances are. So we can teach this through inferring content from simple to complex text. So we can start with Humpty Dumpty and have them realize that it never mentions that it's an egg. So what can they infer about the text and guess what's happening by the year? Or the context of war. And then we can move to more complex texts like metaphoric language in Shakespeare. We can do this through identifying information that is not evident. We can make them realize that maybe they purposefully left something out. Maybe they're just suggesting something here. And we can do it in identifying the stages of direct language. 1, 2 is meaning, and context relevance. So this is when Gallagher talks about what does it say, what does it mean, what does it matter. We want them to slowly dive deeper into the text. Some activities for this are say mean charts. So in the book, this person says this, but they could mean this. Timelines. So how things are changing throughout a text, and there is an example of a multi-layered timeline. So this is what happens, and maybe under they could write why that matters. Literary dominoes. I really like this because for me it's always been hard to understand what a plot point is, but when we have this, they can learn that a plot point is something that's causational, something that causes a turn of events. And then the dominoes can split off and go different directions, and one thing causes another, and it's really interesting. Flip side chart. So it says this, but on the flip side, it could mean this. That one's just a fun way to do that. Positive negative chart. So this could be a big graph that shows us something good happened, but then something bad happened, and then something good happened. Again, another way to identify plot points. And turns in a story. Paragraph plugins, so that's seeking to understand. Reading symbols, this is creating different symbols so that as you read you can annotate in a simple manner and identify places to go back. Responsibility pie charts is a really good one, where it's just a big circle pie chart, and it's, let's say, the example it gives is very sensitive, but it's internment camps, and they say 5% is the Jewish nationals and 45% is Nazis. I don't think I would use that example, but it's a good one. So takeaways from this reading so far. Students need to be taught how to read efferently. So students think that they just read to get an understanding of the plot and nothing else, and we need to teach them how to read even fiction texts in a way that's analytical. And analysis and inference doesn't come naturally to everybody. Some students it might be harder for than others, so we need to scaffold so they understand what it really means to analyze and dive deeper into a text. Reading should be guided by instructor input and framing activities. So as a teacher, I should be providing them with activities that prepares them for reading a text and not just throwing it at them and telling them to read it. Reading should be taught in layers. So the first layer is, okay, what does it say? The second layer is, what does it mean? What is the definition of this? What does this metaphor stand for? And then the third layer is, why does it matter? So why did they do it this way? What was the context of the time that we can pull this out and make it important? And then responding to a text is the final layer of understanding, so that is writing. Right back at the beginning, he talks about how students cannot write analytically until they have understood deep reading. So this all matters as an English teacher because we need to know these things about our students, that they're not just going to be able to jump into a text and be able to analyze it and tell us all the literary devices. We need to prepare our students for reading, give them purposes for reading, and understand how they read and how we can best support them. Thank you so much.